Welcome back to Elder Stoicism. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the weight of someone's silent judgment before you even spoke a word? It's as if your mere presence stirred something unspoken, yet undeniably cold within them. The truth is, not all hatred is loud. Some of it is quiet, hidden behind smiles, glances, or sudden distance, and it often has nothing to do with who you truly are. In today's reflection, we'll explore the subtle, often overlooked 7 reasons why some people secretly carry resentment toward you. It's not always what you've done, but what you unknowingly represent. These insights, grounded in Stoic thought, may shift how you see others and yourself. If this message resonates, I invite you to stay with me. There's more to uncover than you might expect. Envy and jealousy. Among the many hidden reasons why someone may secretly resent you, envy stands as one of the most powerful and corrosive. It's a quiet emotion, often masked by politeness or indifference. Yet it works like poison within relationships. What begins as admiration can quickly turn into contempt. What once looked like respect may sour into subtle resentment. And often, this shift has little to do with you and everything to do with how your success reflects their own unfulfilled desires. Envy and jealousy typically arise when someone sees something in you they believe they lack but deeply crave. Perhaps it's your professional achievements, your self-discipline, your clarity of purpose, or simply your way of carrying yourself with quiet confidence. Instead of feeling inspired, they feel exposed. Your progress becomes a mirror, and in that mirror they don't like what they see. Rather than facing this discomfort with honesty, some turn that unease outward. They may begin to minimize your accomplishments, question your intentions, or even attempt to discredit you entirely. Gossip, passive aggression, and subtle sabotage are often the weapons of choice. This isn't because of something you did wrong, but because your light highlights their shadow. In their eyes, tearing you down becomes a way to feel less inadequate, if only temporarily. This is the dangerous nature of envy. It turns someone's internal dissatisfaction into external hostility. What makes it even more painful is that this negativity is rarely addressed openly. Instead, it lingers beneath the surface, making interactions tense, confusing, or unexpectedly cold. And if you're not careful, you may begin to internalize that hostility, wondering what you did to deserve it. Stoic wisdom. Here is where Stoicism offers clarity and strength. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Their envy is not your burden to carry. Their jealousy is not your flaw to correct. You are not responsible for someone else's perception of their own inadequacy. Instead of shrinking yourself to make others comfortable, continue to walk with integrity. You don't need to apologize for your progress, and you don't need to dull your light for someone who hasn't yet found theirs. But do stay grounded. Recognize that resentment born of envy reveals more about the other person's internal struggle than about your actions. Respond not with pride, but with poise. Not with defense, but with stillness. When you understand that envy is often a reflection of pain, you can meet it with both wisdom and boundaries. You don't need to fix it. You only need to refuse to absorb it. By focusing on what you can control, your words, your reactions, your values, you maintain your inner peace even in the face of silent hostility. Envy may be inevitable, but letting it disturb your mind is not. Stay steady, stay true, and remember their resentment is not your responsibility. Your only task is to keep walking forward with humility, clarity, and calm strength. That is the Stoic way. 2 misunderstandings and ineffective communication. Sometimes it's not envy, arrogance, or betrayal that causes someone to secretly turn against you. It's something far simpler, far quieter, and often unnoticed until the damage is done. Misunderstanding. Many of the tensions that brew silently beneath the surface of relationships don't stem from cruelty, but from misalignment. One person's intent collides with another's interpretation, and from that small spark, a quiet fire of resentment begins to spread. At the root of these invisible fractures lies a failure to truly communicate, not just to speak, but to be understood. A single misplaced word, a poorly timed silence, an unintended tone or facial expression. Any of these can alter how someone perceives you. Maybe you meant to express concern, but it came across as criticism. Maybe you were simply quiet, and someone assumed you were distant, uninterested, or even arrogant. In the Stoic view, perception governs everything, not just what happens, but how it is interpreted, absorbed, and responded to. Marcus Aurelius once observed, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." And yet most people don't pause to question their interpretations. Instead, they hold on to them, build narratives around them, and over time, what began as a momentary misreading becomes the foundation for suspicion, mistrust, or even hatred. When communication fails, not just in delivery but in reception, people begin to construct versions of you in their mind that don't align with who you really are. And tragically, they begin reacting to that imagined version of you as if it were real. Misunderstandings are rarely loud or dramatic. They grow quietly, slowly. A misread message, an unanswered text, a smile that didn't reach your eyes. Soon, the other person has rewritten the story of your connection in their mind. He doesn't care. She's changed. They think they're better than me. These are not facts. They are stories shaped by uncertainty and a lack of clarity. And once formed, they are hard to reverse. Why? Because the mind, once committed to a perception, resists correction. It prefers coherence over truth, certainty over curiosity. In this way, many people begin to secretly resent you, not because of something you actually did, but because of what they believe you did. And here's the uncomfortable truth. To them, that belief is real. Their pain is real. Their judgment feels justified. This is why ineffective communication is so dangerous. It doesn't just create confusion, it creates division. The Stoic antidote: as Stoics, we are called not just to master our emotions, but to cultivate precision in thought and clarity in expression, to speak with care, to listen with presence, to always assume that what we meant and what they heard are not always the same thing. That's why open, honest, and transparent dialogue is not just good practice. It's essential for preserving harmony and trust. When in doubt, clarify. When confused, ask. And when you feel misjudged, don't fight to defend yourself. Fight to understand. How the disconnection began. Seneca reminds us, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. So does the person secretly growing cold toward you. They're not responding to reality, they're responding to their perception of you. And as long as that perception goes unexamined, it shapes how they treat you, how they speak of you, and how they feel in your presence. That's why the antidote to resentment is not always confrontation. Sometimes it's simply the courage to communicate again, to go back not with defensiveness, but with curiosity to say, I sense something has shifted. Can we talk about it? Of course, not everyone is willing to meet you in that space of honesty. Some prefer the story they've constructed over the truth you offer. And in those cases, the Stoic path is to accept what is beyond your control. You cannot force understanding where there is pride. You cannot repair a bond if the other person clings to resentment more tightly than they desire clarity. But you can walk in peace, knowing you did not contribute to the confusion through neglect or avoidance. So if someone secretly harbors negativity toward you, ask yourself not just what you've done, but whether something might have been misunderstood. Reflect on your part with humility, not guilt. Speak with clarity, not explanation. And remember this, most conflicts aren't caused by malice, but by miscommunication. And in a world quick to assume and slow to ask, your effort to understand may be the very act that turns hostility back into harmony. Differences in fundamental values and beliefs. One of the more subtle but deeply rooted reasons people may secretly dislike you is not because of what you've done, but because of what you represent. We live in a world of infinite perspectives. Each person is a mosaic of beliefs shaped by culture, upbringing, education, trauma, love, loss, and longing. And while this diversity is what makes the human experience rich and layered, it also gives rise to silent tension, especially when your values challenge someone else's unexamined worldview. The truth is, people are rarely threatened by facts. They are threatened by what those facts suggest about their identity. When your way of life, your priorities, your ethics, even your silence stands in contrast to theirs, some will perceive it not as difference but as defiance, not as perspective but as provocation. Suddenly, what was merely a disagreement becomes a perceived judgment and the reaction. Quiet resentment, passive aggression, or worse, the kind of subtle hostility that leaves you confused as to where the friction even began. This doesn't just happen in debates over politics or religion. It happens in the smallest moments. When you choose discipline over indulgence, some will see it as you silently criticizing their lack of restraint. When you speak with calm conviction, it can disturb those whose beliefs were never truly their own. Even when you say nothing at all, your very presence can reflect back the parts of others they have avoided facing. In that reflection, people either grow or they begin to turn away from you. As Epictetus reminds us, every person is a product of their own upbringing and experiences. This is not just a philosophical insight, it's a practical reminder to walk through the world with humility. What someone believes is not always a choice. Often it's a result of environment, repetition, trauma, or the simple need to belong. And when those beliefs are challenged, even silently, it can feel like their identity is under attack. That's why people who seem kind and reasonable on the surface can suddenly become cold, dismissive, or even hostile toward you. Not because you wronged them, but because you unknowingly represented something they fear or resist within themselves. The Stoic approach to disagreement, from a Stoic point of view, the wise approach is not to argue, not to force alignment, but to accept, to understand that disagreement is not always an invitation to educate, and that respect does not require similarity. You do not have to adopt someone else's worldview, but you also don't need to prove yours superior. The moment you recognize that everyone holds their beliefs for a reason, often rooted in pain or survival, is the moment you begin to see people not as wrong, but as human. Still, we must also be honest. Not all differences can be bridged. There will be moments when you must hold firm in your values, even when it isolates you. When the cost of peace is self-betrayal, that is a price the Stoic refuses to pay. But this firmness must be grounded in clarity, not contempt. You can disagree with dignity. You can stand your ground without needing others to kneel before it. When resentment arises from these clashes of values, it is often fed by a lack of effort to understand. Most people don't hate what's different, they hate what they don't understand. But instead of seeking understanding, they react, withdraw, or judge. This is where resentment grows. In the absence of dialogue, when assumptions replace questions, when silence becomes defense, and when curiosity is replaced by fear. So what can you do when your values create invisible enemies? You live them fully, but gently. You embody what you believe without needing to announce it, and you remember that some will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you speak, because they are listening through the filter of their own wounds. In those moments, let go of the need to be accepted and anchor yourself in the only approval that matters, your own. As Stoics, we know that the world will not always mirror our beliefs, and that's a gift, because where sameness breeds comfort, difference breeds growth. It teaches us patience, tolerance, and the kind of resilience that doesn't waver under scrutiny. When someone hates you for your beliefs, know that it says more about their insecurity than your conviction. Your job is not to convince them otherwise. Your job is to keep walking with integrity. In a divided world, choosing tolerance is an act of strength. In a noisy world, listening is an act of leadership. And in a fearful world, living your truth without apology is the quiet revolution that changes everything. So let them misunderstand you. Let them wrestle with the discomfort of difference. You are not here to be easily understood. You are here to be authentic, and in that authenticity you will lose people, but you will never lose yourself. The influence of rumors and gossip. There are few forces more quietly destructive than gossip. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't attack you face to face. It erodes you behind your back. And for many, the hatred they feel toward you doesn't come from anything you did directly, but from the stories others have told about you. Stories that may be embellished, twisted, or entirely false. Yet once spoken, They spread faster than truth ever could. Rumors are like a slow-acting poison. They slip into conversations, mutate with each retelling, and before long, you find yourself wearing a version of yourself that you never agreed to. You become a character in someone else's narrative, often cast as the villain, while the people listening begin to judge, distance, or even resent you, all without ever giving you the chance to speak for yourself. What makes gossip so powerful and so dangerous is that it doesn't need to be true to be believed. It only needs to feel true. And people are more likely to believe something that aligns with their pre-existing doubts, insecurities, or biases. In a world that thrives on speed and sensation, a whisper of scandal is more captivating than a page of facts. Gossip doesn't survive because it's accurate. It survives because it's interesting, and that alone gives it life. One of the most painful aspects of being the target of gossip is that you end up defending yourself not against what you've done, but against who people now think you are. And that version of you, shaped by fragments and assumptions, is hard to fight. You may find that, no matter how honest or sincere you are, some people have already made up their minds. You're not fighting for truth. You're fighting through fog, the Stoic shield against gossip. But here is where the Stoic path becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." You cannot control the mouths of others. You cannot dictate what stories are told in rooms you've never entered, but you can control your response. And in a world driven by noise, your calm integrity becomes louder than any rumor. Let others speculate. Let them talk. Let them assume. Your task is not to chase down every falsehood and correct every misperception. That is a race with no finish line. Your task is to remain grounded in who you truly are and to let the consistency of your character do the speaking. The Stoics teach us that reputation is a shadow. It follows you, but it is not you. The substance is your virtue, and no lie, no gossip can ever touch that unless you let it. Yes, it hurts to be misunderstood. It hurts to be judged unfairly. But the deeper pain would be to abandon your principles in an effort to win back the approval of those who believe the worst without asking the truth. The more you cling to what others think of you, the more power you give to their narratives. The moment you reclaim your focus, placing it not on rumors but on reason, you begin to rise above the noise. So what do you do when you become the subject of gossip? You live with even more clarity. You speak with even more precision. You behave with even more dignity because time, truth, and consistency are the antidotes to distortion. Lies may move quickly, but truth moves deeply. And though it may take longer, it eventually reaches the ones who matter. Seneca reminded us, a good character, when established, is not easily overthrown. The people who truly know you will not be swayed by whispers, and those who are easily swayed never truly knew you at all. In the end, you will lose nothing real by staying loyal to the truth of who you are. The world will always have those who gossip, the insecure who need to feel powerful, the idle who need to feel relevant. But you don't need to lower yourself into that pit. Your discipline, your poise, your refusal to participate, that is your resistance. That is your strength. Let them say what they will. Your silence, when rooted in integrity, is not weakness. It's a warning. It says, I do not waste my energy defending myself against shadows. So stand tall, be unshakable, and know this. In the long run, the person who outlasts gossip is the one who keeps showing up as themselves day after day, unchanged, unmoved, and free. Personal insecurities and projection. One of the most quietly corrosive forces behind hidden hatred is something we rarely see coming: insecurity. It doesn't always wear a hostile face. In fact, it often hides behind politeness, small talk, and even applause. But deep beneath the surface, it quietly simmers, fueling envy, bitterness, and sometimes full-blown resentment. And what's worse, it has little to do with you and everything to do with how others see themselves in your presence. When someone hasn't confronted their own fears, failures, or feelings of inadequacy, those unresolved emotions don't just sit idle. They seek release. And often that release comes in the form of projection, redirecting inner discomfort outward, towards someone who seems to represent everything they wish they were or fear they can never become. This is not a conscious attack, it's a psychological reflex, but that doesn't make it any less damaging. Seneca once wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." This is especially true of insecurity. When someone feels insecure about their success, their appearance, their intelligence, or their social standing, the presence of someone who appears self-assured, accomplished, or grounded can trigger a silent crisis. You become unknowingly a mirror, a reflection of their perceived shortcomings, and instead of confronting what the mirror shows them, they try to shatter the mirror. It could be a coworker who sees your progress and suddenly grows cold, a friend who subtly begins to downplay your wins, a family member who mocks your ambitions, not out of logic but out of discomfort. This isn't about what you've done wrong. It's about what your existence reminds them of, their own unlived potential, unhealed wounds, or unmet expectations. And when they feel threatened, that internal storm needs a target. Often it's you. This is projection in its rawest form. It's easier for someone to resent your confidence than to admit they've abandoned their own. It's easier to criticize your discipline than to confront their own complacency. And it's far easier to hate you for reminding them of what they've lost than to do the inner work to regain it. What begins as silent discomfort soon becomes resentment, and left unchecked, that resentment curdles into hate. The Stoic response to projection. But here's what Stoic philosophy reminds us in these moments. Their projection is not your problem to fix. It's not your responsibility to shrink yourself so others don't feel small. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change. But if they simply criticize without clarity, I will hold to my path." You are not here to manage others' insecurities. You are here to walk your path with integrity, clarity, and grace, even when it unsettles those still unsure of their own. However, understanding the root of this hostility doesn't just protect your peace. It also opens the door to compassion. When someone attacks you from a place of insecurity, what they truly reveal is their pain. And while that never justifies their behavior, it does explain it. Recognizing this dynamic can help you depersonalize the negativity. You stop absorbing it as a reflection of your worth and begin to see it as a reflection of their inner battle. This shift doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect or enable toxicity. Stoicism is not passive, it is principled. You can protect your peace while still responding with understanding. You can set boundaries without bitterness. You can offer empathy without self-abandonment. And sometimes the most powerful act of self-mastery is this: choosing not to retaliate when misunderstood, because you know the attack was never truly about you. The world is full of people carrying wounds they've never spoken of, and the moment your light touches their shadow, something stirs. Some will be inspired, others will recoil. Your role is not to manage their reaction, it is to keep shining anyway. Because the more you honor your truth, the more you give others permission to face theirs. And those who are ready will in the end remember this. The hate born from someone's insecurity is not a reflection of your character, but of the fear they have yet to heal. So stand tall, keep walking, and let your presence remain proof that strength and stillness can coexist even in the face of silent enemies. That is the Stoic way. 6. Lack of empathy and understanding. In a world guided by Stoic clarity, we'd like to imagine that most people walk through life with empathy, compassion, and a sincere desire to understand one another. But reality, unfiltered and often harsh, shows us something else. A profound reason why someone may secretly harbor resentment or even hate toward you is rooted not in your behavior, but in their inability to empathize. When a person lacks the capacity or willingness to step into another's experience, they begin to see others not as fellow travelers, but as obstacles, threats, or even enemies. Empathy isn't just about feeling what another person feels. It's the capacity to recognize motivations, to understand context, to look beyond the surface. Without it, people misread your intentions, distort your words, and project onto you emotions that were never yours to carry. A moment of silence becomes arrogance. A boundary becomes rejection. A success becomes a personal attack. And what began as a neutral or even kind exchange mutates into quiet hostility, all because they failed to see beyond themselves. This lack of understanding builds invisible walls. Someone who cannot imagine your perspective will naturally assume the worst. They won't ask why you did something, they'll judge it. They won't wonder what you're going through. They'll reduce it to a label, and from there resentment grows. Not because you wronged them, but because they lacked the emotional clarity to perceive you accurately. It's not just a failure of feeling, it's a failure of perception. Stoicism teaches us that much of our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from the meaning we attach to them. And in those who lack empathy, that meaning is often wildly inaccurate. These individuals tend to see the world in absolutes, good or bad, for me or against me. Their judgments are sharp, fast, and shallow. And because they never pause to consider the complexity of others, they misinterpret nuance as threat. This black and white lens creates a dangerous dynamic, one where you can become the villain in a story you never wrote. This emotional rigidity is often rooted in self-centeredness. Those who are deeply absorbed in their own narrative rarely make room for yours. Narcissistic tendencies, while not always clinical, are common enough to fuel this kind of one-sided perception. When someone is consumed with their own needs, validation, and worldview, they lose the ability to genuinely connect. And when they can't connect, they devalue. Your emotions become irrelevant, your challenges invisible, your triumphs annoying or threatening. And in this emotional vacuum, coldness settles in, which to others feels indistinguishable from hate. The Stoic path, clarity and compassion, but here's where the Stoic lens brings wisdom. Not every form of hostility deserves your reaction. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you always own the option of having no opinion. That includes others' judgments born of ignorance or emotional blindness. When someone resents you because they don't understand you, that's not your burden. It's a reflection of their limited capacity to see clearly. And knowing that gives you power, the power to respond with poise rather than pain. Still, Stoicism doesn't harden the heart, it refines it. Recognizing the source of this resentment doesn't make you cynical, it makes you compassionate. When you realize that someone's coldness stems from their emotional limitations, not your failings, you no longer internalize the wound. Instead, you can choose your response. You can extend empathy where it's safe to do so. Or you can set boundaries and walk away in peace, without guilt, without revenge, without needing to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. At its core, empathy is a bridge. Some will build it with you. Others will tear it down before you ever cross. Your role is to stay centered, to know the difference and to never compromise your own inner clarity just because someone else refuses to see. This is not indifference. This is discipline. This is freedom. This is the Stoic way. Competition, or rivalry. One of the most underestimated sources of hidden hatred is competition, especially when it subtly transforms into rivalry. What begins as a mutual pursuit of growth or excellence can, over time, corrode into quiet hostility, envy, and a silent wish to see the other person fall. This isn't the healthy kind of competition that drives two people to improve. This is the darker, more insidious version, the kind fueled by comparison, insecurity, and unspoken resentment. In the workplace, in social groups, even within families, competition is everywhere. At its best, it sharpens the mind, fuels discipline, and motivates us to push beyond our perceived limits. But when that drive becomes entangled with ego, fear, or unresolved wounds, it turns into a rivalry that poisons connection. Instead of focusing on personal progress, someone becomes consumed by another's achievements. Their attention shifts from how can I become better to how can I make them worse, and this shift is dangerous. It doesn't always show itself through obvious attacks. Often, it hides behind backhanded compliments, subtle disapproval, or undermining behavior. It's the colleague who celebrates your success with a smile that doesn't reach their eyes, the friend who vanishes when things are going well for you, the sibling who competes not out of inspiration, but out of a need to be seen as superior. These rivalries don't have to be declared to do damage. Their quiet nature makes them even more corrosive. Marcus Aurelius warned that the craving for recognition and comparison can erode virtue. When competition becomes obsession, it distorts judgment. What matters no longer is your own growth, but the perceived threat of someone else's light. You begin to see their success not as a reflection of their effort, but as a personal injustice. You begin to believe that what they have should have been yours, and that belief, when left unchecked, can lead to defamation, sabotage, or deliberate attempts to discredit them. Not because they harmed you, but because their rise made you feel small. The Stoic path to inner victory. The Stoic path invites us to rise above this noise. It reminds us that there is no honor in winning by harming others. True strength is measured not by how many you surpass, but by how faithfully you follow your own principles, even when the path is steep, even when someone else is applauded while you are overlooked. Epictetus taught that the only competition worth engaging in is with the self, to be better today than you were yesterday. Not better than your neighbor, your friend, or your rival, but better than your past self. If someone secretly resents you because of what you've achieved, understand this: it is not your success that offends them. It's what your success reveals about their own self-doubt. In that moment, you become a symbol, not of arrogance, but of what they believe they lack. And the solution is not to dim your light. The solution is to hold your posture with grace, not pride, with clarity, not apology. There is space for everyone to grow. Another person's success is not your loss. It is simply their path unfolding. And once we recognize this, we no longer feel the need to compete with bitterness. We learn to admire without envy, to pursue without malice, to stand tall without stepping on anyone else's shoulders. That is the kind of strength Stoicism teaches, not a strength that wins by force, but one that wins by self-mastery. So, if you find yourself the target of rivalry, walk on. Let your actions speak louder than their projections. Compete with no one but your former self. And when others try to drag you into their silent war, offer them something rarer: your peace. Because in the end, real power doesn't need to crush its rivals. It outgrows them quietly, steadily, unshaken.